When a story like Dragon Ball gets a new anime adaptation, the millions of anime fans wait in anticipation to see their favorite childhood heroes in action once again. And with such anticipation comes heavy expectations. As legendary as the whole Dragon Ball series has been throughout the years, with Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z taking the center stage within Shonen, it has been far from perfect with installments like GT, Dragon Ball Super, and now Dragon Ball Daima. This is OG, and today I'll be discussing the 3 elements that are missing from Dragon Ball Daima, which could have made the show more pleasing to us Dragon Ball fans and would have earned some respect from the anime community had it stayed true to its fundamentals. Dragon Ball is a story that influenced my love for anime growing up. See, as a kid my attention was taken by 3 anime: Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, and the one that stood out the most from these 3 was Dragon Ball. I remember having to rush back home after school so that I could be the first one on the TV, so that I don't miss an episode of Dragon Ball. And this was during a time where I didn't even know you could stream anime. Missing an episode meant you'd miss out on all the hype talk that would take place every morning before the school bell attacked us with its endless screams. While watching Dragon Ball Daima, it felt like something was missing, that something from my childhood had been stripped away. I couldn't figure out what it was until I asked myself, what is it that made me fall in love with this legendary show to begin with? I was able to remember what made me enjoy this never-ending tale of Saiyans breaking their limits time and time again. It wasn't the plot nor the growth that captivated me as other shonen stories did, as that isn't what Dragon Ball is all about, but it was rather simpler than that. See, one of the elements missing from Daima played a pivotal role in why I enjoyed this show to begin with, and that is the humor. Whether it's quirky jokes such as Goku not understanding the anatomy of a female body, or untimely and ridiculous comedic relief moments during serious character introductions such as Tao Pai Pai stopping a bullet with his shoe or traveling 1400 miles on a pillar he threw. Dragon Ball has always had humor, and yet somehow, despite having success with this previously, Daima's execution, or rather lack of humor, is surprising. Now, this is not to say they didn't have moments where they tried to add humor, it just didn't land the way you'd expect it to. We can see them attempt this with Bulma and Vegeta, especially during the fight with Goma. It's not that the joke is bad, but rather its execution and who is being used. This is unlike the GT joke with Vegeta trying to get Bulma to notice him after shaving. This felt out of place as some of the other funny moments in the story. There is actually a big reason for the poor comedy in Daima, and that is because the characters which would normally be used to deliver the jokes during tense and climatic moments weren't present throughout the story. There was no awkward and anxious Krillin laugh, no perverted moments from Master Roshi besides the first episode, not even the light-hearted moments from the rest of the Z Fighters. This lack of fun interaction between the characters, which we are so accustomed with, is what affects the humor in Daima. You do feel throughout the story that major characters we have grown to love are nowhere to be found and even replaced by side characters which have no life to them, and whenever they did have funny moments together, it felt rather cheap. Now, don't get me wrong, there are bigger issues with the story besides the plot or lack of character interaction. The second element that Daima failed to do was set up the high stakes. The Dragon Ball series has been accused for years for not having high enough stakes for the main characters, that each battle has no consequences, or the longer the show runs, the harder it is to see anything being a threat or a challenge against Goku and his friends. And to some degree that may be true, though I don't agree with this belief. See, this stems from the belief that the Dragon Balls take away the tension in the story, as no matter the consequences, the balls can be used to undo any damage. This is not how things work. The heroes are put in situations where they have to earn the right to use the Dragon Balls in the first place. They have to beat the Saiyans in order to keep the earth safe and revive their friends. In Namek, it's a race to see who gets the balls first, and even if you go back to the early days of Dragon Ball, Goku had to defeat the Red Ribbon Army in order to secure all the balls. Not only that, but there was always a threatening consequence to Goku losing a battle. If he doesn't beat Vegeta, then all his friends die and Vegeta becomes the strongest in the universe, probably continuing the Saiyan legacy of conquering worlds with his newfound power. If he loses to Cell or Majin Buu, then the whole universe is threatened. If he loses to Frieza, the whole Saiyan race officially gets erased from history. These are some of the high stakes that we see in Dragon Ball, yet in Daima, I never felt like a loss would mean anything. It never made me feel like they had to beat Goma in order to restore peace to the earth or the universe. The feeling of impending doom was never portrayed in the story. You can argue that the capturing of Dende and the fact that Goma wants to have limitless access to the Earth Dragon Balls is what is at stake, but it's not high enough for Dragon Ball standards. It's not just a problem with Goma, but also with the Tamagami. See, in their pursuit to get the balls, they had to face the Tamagami in order to get the Dragon Balls. That as well fell short when it came to the highest stakes. See, if they failed, they could try again, and it never felt like this was the big battle that determines where the story goes. Even with Goma, there was no threat from him at all. As a matter of fact, his influence in the story was limited within the demon realm, and his pursuit of power didn't necessarily affect the protagonists. Where we have seen in previous Dragon Ball arcs with high stakes comes high risk for the heroes, with them losing their lives in the process. Daima never had any of this, and this is something which affected the story negative. The Earth was safe, the universe was safe regardless of the outcome in the story, and unfortunately, without high stakes, the story loses its main reason for existing. It affects the one major key element that makes Dragon Ball worth watching in the first place. It affects the fight scenes. Let's be honest, the reason we all love Dragon Ball is how emotional and thrilling the fights can be. The constant yelling that characters use to power up, the strategy, the tense and difficult challenges our heroes have to face, that is what we all fell in love with. And without high stakes, well, what is it all for? You can save Dende and leave the demon realm without having to fight Goma and wish everybody back. Dragon Ball was never a story about Goku going to another realm or a universe in order to protect those people. It was always about protecting one's own life, in this case Earth and all the people Goku cares for. Why then is it that in Daima Goku has to fight for something that is out of character for him? Not only that, the fights are rather lackluster. The fight with Glorio, the Tamagami, the new margins against the Tamagami, they all feel like filler fights. Nothing felt like the classic back and forth battles we are accustomed to see, and not only that, all this was covered up with a Super Saiyan 4 transformation to try and bring back some life into these fights against Goma, yet even then, it didn't feel the same. The choreography in the fights is lacking too. It just seemed like they were randomly throwing punches and using chi blasts aimlessly. Though the visuals were there at times, I just didn't care much for the outcome of these fights. See, without a reason to fight, there is no reason to achieve this high power. Resolving conflict through fists and kicks becomes meaningless, thus making Dragon Ball Daima meaningless too.